Okay, today we are going to be talking about three-dimensional figures, and we're going to answer our essential question about how can you identify, describe, and classify three-dimensional figures. Here it says that a solid figure has three dimensions. It has length, width, and height. We've spent a lot of time recently talking about two-dimensional figures, or plane shapes and polygons. But here today we're going to add our third dimension. So instead of just having our length and our width, we are also going to be adding our height or depth, some people will call it. Anything that we can touch and hold on to in our real world has got three dimensions. It has all got length, width, and height. Even things that are super flat, like a piece of paper, if we think about it, as we stack more and more sheets of paper together, we start to see that that will grow and it will give us that third dimension of height. It no longer just has its length and its width. So, three-dimensional figures. We are going to be talking about polyhedrons today as well. Polyhedrons are three-dimensional figures. The two that we're going to focus on are prisms and pyramid. Prisms and pyramids have faces that are polygons. So let's talk about what is a face. A face is just a fancy word for the side of our three-dimensional figure. So if we take a look at this one, we have a side here on the top, or a face, right? We have a face here on the side, we have a face on this side, we have a face here in the back, we have a face here in the front, we have a face down here on the bottom. These are all going to be faces. And if we look at this one, right, like each of these faces is in fact a polygon. And so it's going to fall into one of these categories. Now, as we take a look further, it says that a prism is a polyhedron, right? So that's our three-dimensional shape that has a face as a polygon. And it's going to be more specific because it's going to have two congruent polygons as its bases. Now, remember, congruent just means the same. And the word bases is a little bit misleading because usually when we think of a base, we think of the bottom of our shape. But when we're talking about prisms, we can be talking about any two sides that are adjacent and congruent. So if we are talking about the bottom, then the adjacent side would also be the top, right? If on the other hand, we're looking at something that has two triangles in it, right? Doing my best here, right? Like here we have two sides that are congruent. This side and this side are both triangles. They're both about the same. I did my best, like I said. And so this would be considered the bases of this shape. So it doesn't necessarily have to be the bottom and the top. It can be the sides. And if we really think about it, right, if we took this shape and we rotated it around so that it was standing on those triangles, then they would in fact be our top and our bottom, or our quote unquote bases. Now, we get a little bit further in here, and I'm going to just kind of erase this so we have a little bit more space to kind of look at our information, right? But it says that a polyhedron's lateral faces, so lateral faces, are polygons that connect with the bases. The lateral faces of a prism are rectangles, right? So again, if we think about the shape we just drew, right? So we draw our triangles here. These are going to be our bases. If we think about the sides, the shapes that connect these sides, then like this right here is going to be a rectangle. So that is key for our shape to be a prism, right? So that is key for our shape to be a prism, is that the lateral faces, the faces that are the sides that don't make up our base, have to be rectangles. So just keep that in mind. Quick review. Prisms is a polyhedron. It's going to have two congruent bases that are polygons, right? Congruent meaning the same. And it's going to have lateral faces, that's the sides, right, that connect those two bases. And these are going to be rectangles. So those are the key parts here. Let's take a look at a couple of examples and see if we can identify them. So here we have this shape, and we're going to figure out what is the base of this shape. When I take a look at it here, I see that this could be a base because that is congruent with this, and both of those are rectangles. Second step is to make sure that these lateral faces are going to be rectangles as well. So it looks like all of them are. So our base shape is in fact a rectangle. And that means then that this solid figure is going to be, let's scroll down just a little bit, a rectangular prism. Yeah, it's that one. All right, let's take a look at another one. Here, again, looking at our base, here we have this shape that is congruent with this shape. You'll notice that they've been really nice to us and they've put them as the top and bottom for our base shapes here. Remember, it doesn't always have to be that way. Additionally, all of our sides, all of our lateral faces are going to be rectangles here. So this is a rectangle. On the front here, we have a rectangle. So what is our base shape? Our base shape has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sides. So it is a pentagon. And our solid figure, because we have two congruent bases and rectangles making up our lateral faces, this is a pentagonal prism. So really, like, once we get beyond a rectangle, we're going to add ONL, or I guess AL, really, to all of our polygons to make up the name, right? So here we see pentagonal prism. If we look here, we see octagonal, hexagonal, pentagonal, so on and so forth. So just keep that in mind. And I think if we pull this guy out, right, this is going to give us that again. So decagonal, octagonal, hexagonal, pentagonal. And then when we talk about four-sided and three-sided base shapes, we just add the ULAR. So rectangular and triangular is how we name these. Hopefully that helps you out. Looking at one final one, here again, our lateral faces are rectangles, our bases are congruent. And here I see I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Hopefully remember that a six-sided shape is called a hexagon. And because this has the rectangular faces, lateral faces, and the matching bases, we know that this is a hexagonal prism. All right. Now we can have other three-dimensional shapes that fall into our category of being polyhedron that don't match with the definition of a prism, and that is a pyramid. Now, when we talk about a pyramid, we are not going to have two bases that are congruent. In fact, we are just going to have a singular base. All of the lateral faces on our pyramid are going to come to a point, and that's how we know that something is a pyramid. Many of us are familiar with the Egyptian pyramids and all of that kind of stuff. So hopefully we recognize that there is that point that everything at the top sort of comes to. In this case, we look at this one and we're going to look at our base, and the base here is also a triangle. And so this one is going to be a triangular pyramid. Remember, pyramids have that point at the top. All of our lateral faces are going to be triangles as well. But we don't have to have You don't have to have a triangular base. In fact, if we take a look at this one, we're just going to go ahead and pull both of these out of the way. Take a look at this one here on the left. Here we can see that the base of this one, it has four sides. So because it has four sides, they're all right angles, it is a rectangle. And again, all of our lateral faces come to a point. They are all triangles. So this is a rectangular pyramid. This one here, we look at it, our lateral faces are again going to all be triangles coming to a nice point. So we just look at our base, we see that it has 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 sides. So this is a pentagon, and the solid figure's name is pentagonal pyramid. So when we look at the difference between a prism and a pyramid, hopefully we recognize that with a prism, right, we have congruent bases and our lateral faces are all rectangles. A pyramid, on the other hand, here everything comes to a point, right? We have one base and all of our lateral faces for a pyramid are going to be triangles. Both of them we name after the base. So that part should be easy. So it's just remembering prism has rectangular lateral faces and congruent bases. Pyramids, all of our lateral faces are going to be triangles. All right, up next, we're going to talk about our non-polyhedron. So non-polyhedron have curved surfaces, right? So sort of like when we talked about how polygons didn't have curved sides, polyhedrons don't have curved sides either. They don't have any curved surfaces on them. They are all very angular, very straight and square. Here, this one should be really easy. We hopefully recognize it because we enjoy ice cream. And this one is called a cone. So a cone has a circular base and then it comes to a point at the top. Of course, because its base is a circle, we're going to have curved sides on this one. So that is a cone, and that's our first non-polyhedron. We also take a look at this one, and it is called a cylinder. So here with the cylinder, we have two congruent circular bases, right? It's important that they're congruent, otherwise it's going to kind of like get wider at one end than it is at the other. So we have two congruent circular bases, and they're connected by a curved surface. Now, an interesting thing that you hopefully recognize, but may not, is that if you take a cylinder and you cut the sides off of it and you cut it in half, or not half, but you slit it open, you would actually end up with a rectangle. And then the ends, of course, would be our circles. If you don't believe me, go home, finish up using, a roll of toilet paper or paper towels, and just cut a straight line through that cylinder, and it'll unroll and it will become a rectangle. All right, our final non-polyhedron shape is a sphere. And a sphere has no bases, no faces. It's just one big curved surface. A really super cool, interesting point or idea about spheres is that there's this point in the middle of a sphere that is an equal distance from every single point on the outside of that sphere. Just like when we have a circle, right? A circle has a midpoint that is an equal distance from all of the sides. A sphere has something like kind of deep down in the middle of it that is equally far from all points on the surface of the sphere. All right, so to review these, our non-polyhedron are cones, cylinders, and spheres. We're going to take a quick look here, and we're going to sort out our different shapes. So first of all, we just talked about the fact that cones are non-polyhedron. They have curved faces, curved sides. Cylinders also have those curves, and so do spheres. So our only two that are left are prisms and pyramids. Moving on, we're just going to take a look at them. We're going to classify them really quick and keep moving. Here we take a look at this one on the left, and we see that there are rectangular lateral faces here. These two sides are congruent, and this one is in fact a triangular prism. So here we have a triangular prism, and it doesn't even want us to name that it's a triangle. It just wants us to name that it's a prism. We look at the one on the right, and everything here comes to a point, right? No curved surfaces. So here we have a pyramid. Those lateral faces are all triangles. Okay, taking a look at a couple of others. This one on the left, that is going to be a prism. We have two congruent bases. All of our lateral faces are rectangles. Prism. On the right, hopefully we recognize that this is a cylinder. Two congruent circles connected by a shape in the middle. All right, these are going to require us to think just a little bit more. So it says that Mario is making a sculpture out of stone. He starts by carving a base with 5 sides. He then carves 5 triangular lateral faces that all meet at a point on the top. What three-dimensional figure does Mario make? So again, it gives us a lot of hints. We have a base that has 5 sides, right? So we have our, oh my gosh, that is a terrible 5-sided shape, right? Let's try again, right? So we have our base with 5 sides. We recognize that this is a pentagon. Then it says that all of our lateral faces are triangular, right? So that means that they are all coming to a point. And so hopefully we recognize that this is a pentagonal pyramid. The key here really is that it doesn't have congruent bases, and we have these triangular lateral faces. All right, final question, back to the original one of how can you identify and describe and classify three-dimensional figures. And one of our possible answers is that we can look at the surfaces and we can decide if they are flat and polygons, right? So remember, polyhedron have flat sides. If they're curved, we know that they are not going to be polyhedron, so they'll be non-polyhedron. If any surface is curved, I know that the solid figure is not a polyhedron. If it is a polyhedron, I'm going to look at the base and lateral faces, right? Remember, if we have lateral faces that are triangles, these are pyramids. If we have lateral faces that are rectangles, these are prisms. Okay, go complete lesson 11.4 in your math assignment, and hopefully you do well.